Okay, so we've finished with the blade and we're wanting to move on to the cross guard, which is this shape that sits between the blade and also the hilt, which is the handle. So since we're finished with the blade, just make sure that none of these are selected. See, if I have my vertex selected, I can't select any other shapes on my space. So I make sure that that's turned off, and now I can select my cross guard. With this cross guard, the first thing you want to do is give it those beautiful segments so we can manipulate and modify this shape. We're not going to be using editable polys. I'm going to be showing you some modifier list tools that we can use. So let's give it some segments to start off with. Now we're going to give it some length and some height segments. If your length segments look different to mine, have a play around with which ones it sits in, because you may have drawn your particular shape facing this way. Could be going along the y-axis, or it could be going up, which would be along the z-axis, which would affect the length, width and height and where they're going to sit. So with my length, I want to probably give it about 7 segments, and as you can see, they sit all the way around across the top and the bottom of my cross guard. If yours are showing up on the side at all, have a play around with the width and the height to see which ones sit across the top. That's important that they sit up there. I'm also going to give it just a couple of height segments which sit along the side. So make sure you have a box that has segments looking like mine here. I might actually just play around for a second because mine is quite large here. I'm wanting to see if I can just move it down just a little bit and maybe even make it a little bit skinnier. Is everything still connected? Yes. Okay. So what I'm wanting to do now is I'm going to not turn it into an editable poly. I'm going to make sure that I'm in my modify tab, and I'm going to use my modifier list. So there's a drop down menu next to my modifier list, and we're going to use an object space modifier. The first one that we're going to use is a bend. As you can see, the parameters for bend have actually shown up now just in my modify tab. And what I can do now is I can bend it using direction and angle along the X, Y, and Z axes. Now, you may not have it perfect straight away. You might not know which axes you need to bend it on. You might need to play around with that. So let's just go with the Z axis to start with and see what that looks like. So if I start bending it, as you can see, it's bending it over, which is not exactly what I wanted to do. So I'm just going to simply click my y-axis, or you could look at how the x-axis sit. So the y-axis is actually what I'm wanting to do. Now I could bend this towards the blade as a guard, or I could also bend it back the other way. I'm going to bend it towards the blade because that's how I like it. I'm just going to keep bending, bending. If you wanted to, you could play around with direction if you needed, but I'm actually happy with the direction that this is going in, so I'm just going to put that one back to 0. So I'm going to keep bending it. If I did not have these segments that I have across the top here, you would not be able to bend it. So just make sure you have those segments, otherwise you wouldn't be able to do this. I'm just going to bend it around as much as I can. So it kind of bends as a guard around that blade. What I might actually do is also make this just a little bit longer because I want it to bend even more if this is going to work. Okay, it's kind of really wide, but that's all right. We can have a play around with that afterwards. Okay, so once I have finished bending it, you could also play around with another one that is called taper. If I go to my taper in the same section, you can play around with the amount that you want to taper. Obviously, which X, Y, and Z you want to taper it on as well. But that is another modifier that you could be playing around with.